Hello and welcome to Greatest Games Never Played, a Lantern Light Studios production. I'm Alex Fitzsimmons, joined by my co-host Reno Del Maro. Reno, what's up?
Oh man, Alex, chilling. As everybody probably knows listening to us, we kind of, pre-record ahead of time and stuff like that. So some things I say might be a little late. So I got two things for you though. Why are our teams in Philadelphia cursed? Like, especially the Eagles with the injury bug. Why? Why? And two, I've got a little stat correction for you from some prior episodes,
That sounds about right.
especially if you listen to if you listen to the Harlem Globetrotters episode from last week and you listen to the episode before about Yao Ming and Bo and everything like that.
Oh, that's the one
I
where you
mentioned
said Yao Ming was going to become Ray Allen.
I never said that. No, that's a falsehood right there. But I did talk about a Minneapolis Lakers center, right? And I might have called him George Mikan. It's actually George Mikan.
Hmm.
That's how it's pronounced because there's a Mikan technique that's used for all big men to like go off the backboard with both your left side and your right side. And my brother-in-law, the lifelong basketball player and coach, corrected me on that. So George Mikan, it's the Mikan drill. So
Nice, nice. All right, that's cool.
yep. Yeah, so I
Oh,
might add that in a little bit here and there. Ricky Leday, apologize for that. All the way back in episode one, I called him Ricky Letty because I forgot about him as a Phillies fan.
man, you're just firing him off. You went back and listened to the whole catalog, didn't you?
Yeah, I just things that are in the back of my brain that just kind of bothered me. I always try to correct it. You
Well,
know
you
what
know
I
what
mean, and
bothers
move
me,
on.
Reno? Not getting our topic from Taro Sujimoto, and that's what we're going to do right now. Taro, take it away.
Yeah.
The most famous martial artist in the world, a peerless physical specimen, a movie star, a philosopher, the creator of Jeet Kune Do, Bruce Lee, died in 1973 at the age of 32. The mark he left on the world is indisputable. His movies and fame began a kung fu craze in the entertainment industry and created a love affair between Americans and the martial arts. His mixing of styles, while considered revolutionary at the time, would become the standard for martial arts in the decades after his death. This would finally culminate into the sports spectacle we see in the WEC, Bellator, Pride, Strikeforce, the UFC, and mixed martial arts as we know it today. Bruce Lee died before he could see the transformation his philosophy would bring to combat sports. But what if Lee had the opportunity to compete in the sport he laid the groundwork for? What if Bruce Lee stepped into the octagon and competed in the modern times of the UFC?
And we're back. Reno, Bruce Lee, you ready for this one?
Oh yeah, I love Bruce Lee.
Now, you've been talking to me for as long as I've known you about how you're going to use your kung fu to defeat fictional animals or other people. So I know you have a passion for the martial arts.
Yes, I've never trained in kung fu. I think I only know one or two people who've ever done kung fu. You know what I mean? Shout out to my man Nick T that I grew up with. But yeah, no, I love Bruce Lee. I love, martial arts movies. Love MMA and boxing and fighting. So yeah, I love Bruce and I'm excited about this episode, of course.
Cool, cool, cool. So if we're going to approach Bruce Lee and putting him in the UFC, how do you want to approach this? Do you want to go into the history of Bruce Lee first?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about Bruce, himself, the man, the actor, like what he, did in his life, a very short life. Um, and then we could kind of get into like Dana White essentially called him the grandfather of modern day MMA. So we could talk about that. And then we could put him in the MMA and see how he would fare against some big time fighters.
All right. Well, if we're gonna get there, we gotta know where he's born, man. San Francisco, 1940.
Yeah.
Raised in Hong Kong, though, so he was the son of a Cantonese opera star. His father was Lee Hoi Chun, and his mother Grace Ho was Eurasian, which ended up being a problem in his training later. That he was not pure Hong Kong. They felt they shouldn't be teaching to someone who was not um, all Hong Kong or all Chinese.
They
Um,
didn't like them training Caucasians
yeah,
or Black Americans or anything like that. They didn't like any Westerners learning their forms and styles of fighting.
yeah. So he goes over to Hong Kong as a child, and his family is his dad's an opera star, so he's exposed to film early. So he becomes a child actor right from the gate. So he's
That's the crazy thing about it too. Like I didn't even realize that.
yeah, he's
Um,
in what they say 20
yeah.
different films by the time he's 18 in Hong Kong.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll tell you what. One of the great biopic movies of Bruce Lee is Dragon: The Bruce Lee Story,
Hmm.
starring Jason Lee. I like it, but obviously Hollywood always takes their certain I guess what's the word I'm looking for, Alex? Like when they
Liberties.
kind of liberties. Yes, exactly. And they kind of put things in there, but they might not exactly been the way it is. But I mean, they even talked about him dressing up as a girl and having girl names at times. But they kind of put in the perspective of like his family was afraid of this family curse, and the curse didn't affect women; it only affected men.
Hmm.
But I don't know. I didn't really get that in the history of his family. I don't know if that was
No,
necessarily
I
true.
didn't pick up any of that either.
Yeah. I mean, he was born, as in like most Asian countries use the last name, their surname first. So he was born Lee Jun Fan. But his American name, Bruce, was given to him actually by a nurse at the Jackson Street Hospital when he was born in 1940. Born in the year of the dragon, born in the hour of the dragon, thus becoming the dragon.
So, all right. So he leads a normal life outside of being a child actor in Hong Kong, right?
Yeah.
But starts getting into street fights, and that's a thing that apparently was a normal thing back then. Was there's a lot of street fights and gang fights going on in Hong Kong, and so Lee decides he's gonna go get himself trained up, right?
Yeah, at 13, he starts training with the famous Wing Chun Kung Fu master, and we'll get into Kung Fu. Ip Man, spelled YIP, like Yip Man, but I think pronounced Ip Man, who became a famous like master, and a lot of people focused in on him probably over the last decade. You might have seen some of the Donnie Chen movies where he starred as Ip Man, who
Yeah, I think
is
there's four.
Bruce Lee's
There's four of
famous
them out
trainer.
there. So if you follow that stuff,
But you know what's crazy, Alex? Like, think about Bruce Lee. Like, when I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, like, whenever you mention martial arts, like, they're like, oh, the greatest martial artist of all time, Bruce Lee.
yeah,
And a lot of times, like, when you look at martial artists now, like, really incredible, great martial artists, and I'm not saying it's every case, but a lot of times they're training from a very young age. Like, some of them start out like 3, 4, 5 years old,
yeah,
or start out in their, single digit age as kids and then train up throughout their life and then just become predominant at like different styles. He actually started late,
he did.
13 years
He
old, you know
did.
what I mean? And only trained with Ip Man for 5 years.
Yeah, and for a guy who
But it was a
is
natural.
yeah, who becomes like you said, one of the greatest martial artists of all time, to have that kind of time to study, you would expect longer, and you would have expected an earlier start. I do agree with you on that. I thought that too when I was going through the history of this man. Was that
Well, that just goes to show, like, and I didn't mean to cut you off, but that just goes to show that basically, like, when you have speed and agility and just like, you got physical gifts, it goes a long way. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like, you could overcome a lot of what you don't know knowledge wise with sheer ability. So this shows in 5 years, like, wow, this guy is a quick study.
yeah, and so that and I think it's important to get it to that, like because he studies under more than just Ip Man here. Under Ip Man, there was Wong Shun Lung, and that
Hmm.
seemed to be the guy who was kind of doing most of the teaching. Ip Man was kind of the headmaster, if you will, of the whole thing. So it begins that, but by 16, after getting in street fights, he ends up getting transferred to a new school, St. Francis Xavier's College,
Hmm.
where he takes up boxing under the boxing coach there, Brother Edward, who I don't know anything about other than he coached boxing. But you can see right there, he begins branching out. He's studying new styles there.
Yeah, Western style
He's
boxing.
also a dancer there too. He's a championship cha cha dancer, which may come into play with his footwork later.
I would agree with that. I mean, think about like all the NFL players and different athletes who've been on like Dancing with the Stars and
Hmm.
stuff like that, they're all incredibly successful because of agility, footwork, timing. Like this absolutely is going to be huge because think about his ability, not only his speed, but his footwork, his grace, his timing, and his ability to probably stretch himself out too as a dancer is all going to key into his ability in martial arts.
Hmm. So 59, then he gets another fight. This time with someone who is a son of a triad member, and this is when his family realizes it is time to get him out of town, and they ship him off to San Francisco to stay with his sister and some family friends. Um, Within a few months, Lee's been has moved himself out to Seattle, where he's finishing up high school. He's working as a waiter, and he's teaching his own brand of the Wing Chun that he learned from Yip Man and Wong Shun Lung. And he's opened up his first martial arts school, um,
The
Lee
Jun
Jun
Fan
Fong,
Gung Fu Institute.
yeah,
Yeah.
in Seattle. So this guy, still in high school, he's a busy man. He is wasting no time.
Oh yeah, this guy's a worker. That is the one thing, like the one I'll tell you, that's the one thing that no one could ever take away. This guy is a worker, like from a young age. He was an actor, dancer. He's a mover and a shaker, man. That's why people like him become successful because they get things done. They're constantly working,
Hmm.
constantly getting better, perfecting themselves. So the whole Junfan Gung Fu. So Kung Fu, funny. It's actually the same word. It's like all a derivative. It's like all a derivative. It's basically the writing system. So you got like the Wade Gillis system of writing and spelling in Chinese like identically. So it would be Kung Fu with a K. But then there's the pinyin system that's Gung Fu. So a lot of people are like, "What's Gung Fu? Is that different?" No, it's essentially the same thing, said the same way. It's just all about how they wrote it, and they tend to use the pinyin system in
So,
China.
so I think for us, for the sake of making this easy, kung fu the rest of the time.
Yeah, Kung Fu.
Kung fu the rest of this podcast here. So don't
Yep.
confuse me with any gung fu stuff in here. All right. All right. So 61, Lee begins attending the University of Washington. He starts studying drama, philosophy, psychology, among other subjects. But by 64, he's dropped out. He's moving to Oakland with James Yim Lee to open up his second martial arts institute here in
Yeah.
Oakland. And this James Yim Lee, he's an interesting character too, because he's what do they call him? He's an iron fist.
Yeah.
And so he's one of the guys who can break the bricks with his hand. He's written books on this. So this is another case of where Bruce Lee is surrounding himself with different martial artists and people of different disciplines. And as we saw early on, how quickly he learned the Wing Chun from Yip Man and the company there. He's picking up new things everywhere he's going. He's meeting someone new. This is a case right here of a guy who's really outside of what he normally does, but he's going to take advantage of the connections this man has and a chance to learn from him.
Absolutely. He's picking up all different styles and he's basically collaborating them and molding them into his own. It's crazy too, because you talk about a guy who's an iron fist, you know what I mean? Essentially you see a lot of the iron fist guys like putting their fingers and hands through like sand and like, you'll see guys hitting lead with their knuckles and stuff
Mhm.
like that to toughen up their hand and their punch. So like, but I remember those old lost episodes on the Pierre Burton show back in '71. Pierre Burton asked like Bruce Lee, like, "Oh, how many pieces of wood could you break through?" He's like, I wouldn't. He's like, I'd hurt my hand. You know what I mean? He's like, I don't want to break my hand. Like, even he's like recognizing, like, why am I going to punch through wood? You know what I mean? Like, it's a waste of time. Like, I'm just going to hurt my hand.
Yep.
So it's funny.
So they moved to Oakland, and this James Yim Lee, he puts Bruce Lee in connection with a guy Ed Parker, who is considered to be the founder of American Kempo, right?
Yep.
And
American Kempo Institute.
and this guy is getting ready to put together a karate tournament. This karate tournament will be the first one of its kind, and this karate tournament is going to go on every year up to today. So in 1964, the Long Beach International Karate Championship. This is where Bruce Lee kind of first showcases what he does to the world. And I know for the sake of our story, we wish he was fighting guys, but instead he was putting on a karate exhibition essentially, or where he was performing 2-finger push-ups, 1-thumb push-ups. He did his
Yep.
1-inch punch, and then
The
just
sidekick.
yeah, he's putting on an exhibition of his skills. Oh, there was also a karate tournament going on, and at this tournament he also meets guys like Chuck Norris, and more importantly, I think is Jun Gu Ri, who he develops a friendship with. And this guy is a Taekwondo master. So he begins again. This is another case of him incorporating new skills from this guy's a South Korean grandmaster, the father of American Taekwondo, in fact. And so he incorporates this guy. He starts meeting this guy and training with this guy then. But this moment also is kind of where he gets discovered. So building on that attention, he begins getting an opportunity to act. In particular,
Mhm.
the Green Hornet in 1966.
Yeah, when he becomes Kato in the Green
Hmm.
Hornet. I think he did some a Batman, a couple of episodes in
Yep.
Batman too, right? As Kato, which he wasn't happy about. He wasn't happy about his performance.
No,
Um,
he was kind of the sidekick, and like he probably felt like he was cast for racial reasons, probably.
yeah. And I mean, they even talked about it in Dragon the Bruce Lee story about how like they originally considered him for the TV series Kung Fu that end up going to David Carradine,
Well, he
and a
well
lot of it
well
was because of
he
that,
says
right?
that he pitched them on Kung Fu, on the whole
Yeah,
idea for it. He pitched them on the idea, and they stole it from him, is what he says. And
they took
they
the
came out
idea
later
from it.
and have his idea with David Carradine, and of course they're going to say that they had this idea working in their heads before. But you can understand why if you go on and pitch something to somebody and then you see them doing that a year later, you're going to be like, well, this doesn't feel good. So,
Well, they definitely stole it from him, and they put a Western actor
mhm.
in the role because there had been a lot of I guess turmoil during the time about how a US audience would receive like an Asian lead, you know? And yeah, that hurt Bruce. And I think that's that's a major reason why he went back to Hong Kong and started starring in movies again too. So but uh essentially what gets interesting about that Ed Parker tournament in the biopic Dragon, it shows him fight in that tournament, and you're correct. He didn't fight from all counts. In the movie, they essentially give him this fight with another Chinese martial artist that was upset. Now, in real life, there's a gentleman named Wang Jack Man
Yes.
who becomes this character. Well, he's in Dragon, he's this character, but he's actually like another character named like Johnny Lou or something like that. And they met at this like temple and they fought and like Bruce beat him. And then this guy kicks him and breaks his back. And that's like the whole thing. But a lot of that again is sensationalized.
Hmm.
He actually hurt his back and had a major back injury and was laid up for months from a weightlifting injury that he had with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
So
But
I want to go back to that Wong Jack Man thing, because this guy it's an interesting story. I thought because we in our research here, I was trying to find examples of times Bruce Lee fought, and there's very few that are really. I mean, you hear about sparring sessions, you hear about he fought this guy, but there's nothing really documented where we were get to see him fight. But so this is a case right here where Wong is claiming that he accepts Lee's challenge. That Lee put out a challenge that anyone in the San Francisco area can defeat everyone, and so Wong says he shows up for it. But Lee has claimed that Wong Jack Man came at him because he was teaching white students.
yeah,
So
and that's what the movies in the movie that's kind of what they emphasize. But they give the guy a whole different character name
yeah,
and say that they want him out of Chinatown
and they
with
had
that.
very
You know?
different recollections of the fight.
Yeah, and there was only like first there was stories that there was like 15 people who witnessed it, and then they're like, oh, it was only really three. It was
Yeah,
Bruce Lee's agent, another fellow fighter, and his
it
wife.
was James Yim Lee, the guy we met before, and his wife,
Yeah.
and there was the guy from the Wong Jack Man's team over there. So their story is that it was a 20 to 25-minute fight, and Lee had to quit because he was too winded. And the story
Yeah, that they never had a finality to it.
yeah, and Lee, and of course James Yim Lee and his wife, they say it was about a 3-minute fight before Wong agreed to quit.
Yeah, Linda said it basically they bowed to each other. Bruce went on the attack. Wong Jock Man ran, like was running from him. Bruce was essentially hitting him in the back of the head and in the side of the face, and like his hand was getting swollen from just hitting this guy. I mean, even Bruce came out with a quote of saying something like, "My hand was getting swollen from hitting this guy in his hard head." And that the fight was over, the guy just yielded after a couple minutes. But Wang Jackman and I guess his backup say, oh, it went 20 to 25
Hmm.
minutes, and they basically just said, hey, it's a draw. So I don't know. I didn't I didn't really, it was like you want to get into it because now they've made a movie about that fight itself.
Hmm.
But again, like it seems like everybody's recollection on it is different, and there's probably a little bit of truth and a little bit of, you know, embellishment on all parts.
And I would say this too,
So
too about it. Like when Bruce Lee goes to create his own style, then the Jeet Kune Do, which we're gonna get to next, there's some citing that apparently he was disturbed with the way the fight went with him. And so Lee wanted to create a style that was less regimented and like more free flowing and incorporated elements from the world around him and different styles from around him, where he was never boxed in by a style. He wanted to create the style of no style, was what he was trying to
yeah,
do. And if he had won the fight in 3 minutes, why would he be trying to rewrite his style?
and that's the thing too. And in Dragon, the bio Dragon, the Bruce Lee story, that fight was at the Ed Parker tournament.
Hmm.
He fought him in a ring, and he told him he'd beat him in under 60 seconds with his new system. So there's where the embellishment, the sensationalism comes
Yes.
from. Like he beats this guy who he fought in a temple before. He beat the guy in a couple minutes, gets his back broken, comes back after being injured after all this time, and then fights this guy here. But in real life, it sounds like he was at that tournament. He was training, you know, Westerners in real life. This guy came at him. They had a fight. Somehow, if they did have a scrap, regardless of how long it went, Bruce Lee felt, I can't like hold to any particular style or system. I've got to be, you know, basically on the fly. I've got a fight to my best ability and fight on the fly. That's where Jeet Kune Do,
Yeah.
you know, way of the intercepting fist or foot comes from. It's basically, you know, a counterbalance of attack and counter punching and being able to mix in different styles of martial arts.
Yeah,
But
and,
Alex,
and he said he regretted ever calling it Jeet Kune Do, though. He said he wished he wouldn't have done that, because the idea becomes then that this is a style, this is a way of the intercepting fist, and really he said that the point of it was that there was no style, that it would always change, that anything around it would he would
he was just a
incorporate whatever, he
fighter.
would throw away whatever didn't work and take whatever did work, and it really
Yeah,
wasn't about some way of intercepting fist, which the idea was that you would kind of counter as the guys making the move at you in the first place. Um,
agreed.
and like and
But you know
really
what,
that
too?
defeats the purpose of when he says the style of no style. So he did later regret naming it at all, or at least naming it what he named it. So, but
Yeah,
moving
having no
along,
way is way, you know, using no limitation as limitation.
yeah, and then Lee, with the Jeet Kune Do style, which essentially becomes incredibly popular, especially after the Green Hornet success, and then Lee starts getting leading roles, beginning with the Big Boss, right in 1971.
Yeah, in Hong Kong.
Yep, and following it up with 72, The Fist of Fury, to even bigger success.
Which was also known as the Chinese Connection. I think
Hmm.
a lot of people think they're separate movies.
They're not.
It's one the same. That's my personal favorite movie of his is
Yeah,
the
that's a really
Chinese
good one.
Connection.
Really good one.
Yeah.
So after
I know.
that, he's allowed to he's been so successful. He's allowed to now write, direct, star, and choreograph his third film, Way of the Dragon.
Mhm.
And there he fights
Which
Chuck
is
Norris.
the famous fight.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we have the Chuck Norris, which is one of the most celebrated fight scenes in movie history, I'd say.
Absolutely. And you know what? There's still people to this day that argue. And I mean, it's funny because Chuck Norris was quoted as saying that the one person he knew that he could not defeat was Bruce Lee. Like Chuck Norris was telling people, like, I couldn't beat him. Yet there are a lot of people that believe that if they actually fought, Chuck Norris would have won. They just said Chuck Norris was almost, if not equally as fast, and he was bigger and stronger, and that they think Chuck Norris would have housed him.
Yeah, I don't know. I
But
don't know if Chuck Norris is as fast. I'll say that just based on what I've seen.
well, we
But
saw a lot of Chuck Norris, 80s Chuck Norris, who was a little older. You know, he's probably like late 30s, early 40s when he was throwing some of those kicks in
I have no doubt
Delta Force.
Chuck Norris was bigger. But man, Bruce Lee, his speed is unreal.
It
His
is
speed is
unreal. And
unreal.
hand and foot speed are crazy. I mean, hey, going back, you know, that the one fight I do recognize as being recorded would be him versus Gary Elms, the Western style boxing fight in
Mhm.
1958. Like when he was, you know, they had an inter school boxing tournament. and he fought this kid, and apparently they kind of went under mixed fighting rules with kung fu and boxing, so he was able to use his feet along with his fists, so he was able to use his legs, and he basically like kept knocking this guy down and winning points like that. I recognize because that was actually in a boxing tournament.
Yeah.
It was like one of the notable Hong Kong fights that kind of changed the Hong Kong fight scene.
Hmm.
And the Jack Wong Man fight, it's like it sounds like a fairy tale. It might have been a scrap, but it might not have been much.
Yeah, I don't know. There may be something there, but I guess we'll never really know. Is kind of the point.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, so getting back to his film history, his filmography here is just want to make sure we get through this. So he's able to do Way of the Dragon, and he begins in '72 working on his fourth film, then Game of Death. But then Warner Brothers swoops in and goes, "Hey, we want to make an international hit with you. We're going to join with your company, and we're going to make a new movie called Enter the Dragon." So Lee scraps Game of Death, starts working on Enter the Dragon, puts this movie together. They film it in Hong Kong. It's going to be great. 6 days before its release, Bruce Lee dies at the age of 32,
Yeah.
1973. So
From a reactionary, right? It was
he had a
took
cerebral edema, so like a swelling of his brain, and it's kind of uncertain about what exactly caused that. There's a lot of speculation on that right there.
Yeah, and I know there was like some Chuck Norris audio that talked about what really killed him, and it was pretty deep. And you're
Well,
like,
Chuck Norris
whoa, like,
thinks it was a mixture of antibiotics and painkillers that caused the swelling in his brain.
Yeah.
There's other people. I think it was other medication he was taking. He's taking painkillers. There's other stuff he was taking as well.
Well, he was having headaches, right?
He was
I
having
don't know,
headaches, and there's also people that think it may have been a heat stroke related. He had his sweat glands removed from his armpits. And they say that may have led to like an overheating thing that caused the swelling in his brain too. He didn't think sweating at your armpits was attractive for a movie star to be doing on film, so he had them removed.
Well, Chuck Norris was a big proponent of it, I think, because he had spoken about how Bruce was like, even after he retrained himself how to walk and fight and train again, that he was still very much in pain. Like he still had a ton of back pain.
Yeah.
And he lived with it. He basically lived through the pain, and I could see the concoction of everything. And I think the headaches were probably coming from a fluid. Like there was issues in the spinal fluid that was creating the headaches, and then it was just a bad concoction that he took. And it's a shame because he was just scratching the surface.
Yeah, and obviously this movie then 6 days after it's released, 6 days after he dies at the age of 32, goes on to massive success. It could kind of changes the game. Like kung fu now becomes this massive industry, really, in the West. Like we have all sorts of movies, spin-offs, new actors are coming out. There's all sorts of songs. It's just the new craze, and Bruce Lee didn't get to see it in the West. But he did. He got to see people. He didn't get to see it, but people took advantage of it, taking the scraps from the Game of Death he was recording and putting that together as his fifth movie, with a lot of lookalikes and stand-ins and doubles, kind of playing most of the movie. And it was released 5 years after his death, and that's the one with the famous yellow jumpsuit we've seen, where he fights Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
I mean, Beatrix Kiddo used that in Kill Bill.
Mhm.
It was a throwback to honor him. I mean, if you think about it, action heroes before that were mostly like a Steve McQueen or something like that, or John Wayne. Like they were like cowboys or cops and stuff like that. Like a lot of like gunplay and stuff like that. Like the old brooding action of like punching somebody in a bar. He changes the game. I mean, he probably creates. He's without a doubt like the I would say the first real star to create that 80s, action star, like the Arnold
he definitely did. He
Schwarzeneggers,
changed the game for
Sylvester
action movies.
Stallone's, Van Damme, Seagal's, Jeff Speakman. They all have to credit their careers really in the early days. I mean, to Bruce Lee in the action film genre of that.
Yeah. So I think that kind of tells the story of Bruce Lee. But I would like to just mention real quick that we talked about his trainers, the people he worked with, and because there's too many here to mention. But we could mention tons of them. But essentially, the point being is this guy trained with every big name at the time. He spent as much time as he could sparring with them, whether we saw it on tape or not. This guy was working with wrestlers, judo experts. We talked about taekwondo and
Actors.
kempo and Wing Chun and boxing and eskrima and nunchucks. Like this guy was doing everything he could to absorb every different martial art to combine it into his own personal style, which became the Jeet Kune Do. Now, when we talk about the effect that he had, obviously talked about the effect on movies, but his combining of styles essentially it makes him a forerunner to the UFC in that way, to the mixed martial arts.
Absolutely.
But whether you want to say he's the father or not, which a lot of people have, um, I think it's irrelevant. The fact is, he's clearly a forerunner to this. Like he is a guy ahead of his time on this one right here, where he acknowledged the weaknesses and stuff like Wing Chun, where he felt like boxers could defeat it easily because there was no sparring involved. So he started sparring. He started incorporating all these different things. So when we talk about taking Bruce Lee and putting him into a UFC kind of fight, again, basing it off very little information we have about how Bruce Lee actually fought, and instead of we're basing it on stories and eyewitness accounts of what he would have done. It is a tricky thing that we're trying to do here.
It is. I mean, you look at the movie he never really got to complete, Game of Death, that he started working on. There's a good majority of the movie where he shot scenes similar to his son Brandon on The Crow, who died in a mysterious accident too. And the prop gun actually had a bullet still lodged in there, like a shell from one of the prop bullets from a blank that killed him. Like Bruce had footage in Game of Death, but they used other actors to kind of use it. But the whole idea of that movie was he was going up a tower to face different fighters. And he used different styles to defeat different fighters. He fought a Kempo guy, he fought a Jiu-Jitsu guy
Mm-hmm.
who had, with wrestling. Then he fought like the long kind of kung fu boxing guy in Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. So you see this now in like one of his latter movies that he never got to finish, and he's even showing you his expression of form of martial arts. He's expressing himself through the idea of being able to combat different styles with no style, with any style.
Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things we also didn't really mention about him too, I think it's worth mentioning, is the guy was a philosopher, he was a poet, and so you can look online and find endless quotes about going with the flow or about just one of the ones I thought was important for MMA here would be absorb what is useful, discard what is not, and what is uniquely your own. So
Yeah.
he's again he has all sorts of wise quotes like this, but I think that one there is relevant in the case of talking about how he built his Jeet Kune Do, which ultimately is a forerunner to mixed martial arts, where you are willing to incorporate whatever you need to in your style. So
I mean, if you think about it, one of his most famous quotes he did in Longstreet. Now he was, he re-quoted it from the actual and I apologize, like he actually re-quoted it from the Pierre Burton show, but he did it differently. He actually said it a little bit better. But on the Pierre Burton show, he asked him about that. He's like, "Do you remember your line from that show?" And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "It was empty your mind, be formless, shapeless like water. You put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it into a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now, water could flow or it could crash. Be water, my friend." That is, like you said, the essential philosophy of Jeet Kune Do, of
mhm.
his no style as style. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, so I think then if we're gonna do this, if we're gonna put him in the UFC, I know we had a talk before. Who are we gonna put him? Because I don't want to do a whole career. I want to know if he could actually hang. So if we're gonna pick some guys and pit him against them, we're gonna drop him into today's UFC. We're gonna say who's an interesting fight. Who do we want to see him fight? Ignoring the parallel universe we've created by taking a whole industry that's kind of based on what Bruce Lee did and then putting Bruce Lee in it all these years later. We're gonna ignore that and just go with the flow on this and hope the timeline does not unwind.
Yeah,
Um,
and absolutely. If you think about it too, in the 60s, Alex, he was a little bit, he fluctuated anywhere between, I've seen 137 to 155. A lot of times they say in the 60s, he actually was at a heavier weight because he was powerlifting and he was good friends with Kareem Abdul Jabbar. And that's how he got into powerlifting. But then he realized in the latter part of his life, between the 70 and 73, when he did his final few movies in Hong Kong, Big Boss Man, or Big Boss and Chinese Connection, Fist of Fury, whatever you want to call it. he actually realized that he started training differently because he wanted to lean down. So he kind of probably sat somewhere between 140 and 145. So I've got him fighting at 145, which in the UFC is featherweight. And there's been some big time featherweights in the UFC, like some real great recognizable champions over the years. So
So I'm gonna first begin by saying I believe that's where we're putting him. I think he's undersized for it, but I think that yes, can he get to that weight? Has he been that weight? Yes, but I think a more appropriate weight would have been a little lower. But I think for the sake of interesting fights, putting him against guys coming to meet him there's a good catch weight for him to meet at.
yeah, because 135, he's probably super fast, tall, a big 135er. I think 145, though, he could still go up a couple pounds, maintain his speed, and probably be stronger. And he's got pretty good height for, he's not as short as people think. He's 5'8". I mean, he's a super tall guy, but it's a pretty good height for a guy at that weight. Normally, guys that weight are probably anywhere between 5'5" and 5'10" normally.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, there's definitely some 5'7s, 5'6s, 5'8s in that weight class,
yeah,
but I understand. I think 145 is a good catch weight to start at. Um,
absolutely.
I guess one of the questions I would pose to you before we even go through the fighters we're gonna fight is when I say Bruce Lee, why could a guy like Bruce Lee even compete here? Like, what does he have that makes him competitive against these guys? Like, because we're taking this guy who is, I mean, I guess we're going to assume he's had some time to train here, but like,
Mhm.
why are we going to? I mean, what age are we talking? 30? Are we taking 30-year-old Bruce Lee? 32?
Yeah, I'd say
Right before he
30.
died.
Yeah, I'd say 30. Let's do him at 30. I think that's, probably around the average age of a UFC fighter now, 30.
So
You have some younger
obviously,
guys, you have some older guys,
he's got
but
some catching up to do because a lot of the martial arts have progressed since his time. Do we believe he's able to learn quick? I mean,
yeah,
I think what we've seen and talked about would tell me he can.
yeah, he's a chameleon. He's the master of adaptation. And I think the fact that he had Western style boxing at a young age mixed with traditional Chinese martial arts like Wing Chun, Chinese boxing, and styles of kung fu. And then you see later in his life, he's adding like kind of jujitsu, sambo, wrestling, and his kicks.
And
You know what I mean?
he
Have
worked with Gene LaBelle. What's it
yeah,
called? The Godfather of
judo Gene
grappling.
LaBelle. Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, you saw like I was talking about in Game of Death. You saw that he was recognizing this, and he had to fight a keto guy, so he used a different style, like more of a wrestling style, a sambo style. He fought other fighter by like taekwondo or boxers, and he used different styles to combat them. So I think he absolutely can because of his speed, his footwork, and his technique.
So you
All generates power.
so I think I look at things like he's a natural athlete. We talked about his speed and power. Like some of that's natural. His
Absolutely.
speed is, yeah. I think his hard work is something we talked about earlier too. This guy, I don't know anyone who works harder than Bruce Lee.
If
like
you yeah, no, he's outworking everyone in the room.
this guy,
So if
this
this
guy
guy's gonna be a
moves.
fighter, he's
This guy
dedicated.
moves from Hong Kong a year later. He's in high school. He's waiting. He's opening up gyms. He's teaching people. Like he is expanding. Like he is. He was doing a lot real early. He never stopped moving.
He
Um,
wasn't sitting around cooking,
no,
in kitchens for his whole life. He had plans to
that be and then this
be
all being
something
said,
greater.
talking about cooking, he's also a nutrition forerunner too, where he is kind of on the front of that, where he was making nutrition
Protein
shakes.
shakes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
he's known for his cross training, his intense workouts. There's a lot of things this guy did that kind of make you go, oh, he's not of that era. He's trained like the guys do now.
He brought cardio with weights into the mainstream, like combining cardio, weights, and diet. Like he's like the first one that really got to. I mean, this guy sat at probably they say in the prime of his life, like under 6% body fat. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
That is ridiculous.
So
He's shredded.
I just wanted to lay out the groundwork for why we even think a guy from this time is able to compete with guys like this. And I think we've been fair with him. I think if I didn't think he could make it, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
I agree. I agree. So who do you want to pit him off against? I got a guy we could have him fight first.
Let's hear it.
Good startup fight in the UFC, right? To get his feet wet. Frankie Edgar, right? 145-pound. Edgar was a former 155-pound lightweight champion.
He's actually 130. He's
Um,
actually at 135 now. He just moved down.
Now he's currently at 135, but he was the former 155-pound
Mhm.
champion. He moved down to 145. He never won the title there, and now he's down at 135 currently. but he's got a 24-8 record, 7 of those by knockout, 4 subs, 13 decisions. He's not primarily known for his punching power. He's not a knockout artist, but he's a good boxer, really good wrestler, and he's a black belt in jiu-jitsu under the Gracie family.
He's also a D1 wrestler too.
Yep. He had 2 losses by knockout. He's 5'6", right? So he's got notable wins over BJ Penn, Gray Maynard, who he won the title off of at 155, Cub Swanson, Chad Mendez, Uriah Faber. I mean, these are all huge names in the MMA game. Notable losses: he lost to Ben Henderson twice, he lost to Jose Aldo twice, and he lost to Max Holloway. So I you want me to start going?
Yes, let's start us off.
All right, so it's not for the title, obviously, so it's going to be a 3-round fight, right? I got first round. I got both guys are feeling each other out in the first round, finding each other's range. Edgar tries to back Lee up against the cage. He clinches. He tries to dirty box him, but Lee uses his height, speed, and leverage to kind of reverse out of Edgar's clinch, stay on his feet. But I give Edgar the first round 10-9 just for more activity, right?
Yeah, no, he was an active fighter.
Yeah, absolutely. He's always moving. He's a good counterpuncher too, but he's going to be short in stature and arms, so he's not going to have the reach that Bruce Lee has. Edgar comes out in the second round, uses his wrestling now to try and take Bruce to the mat. But Bruce is training, and he knows that Edgar's going to try to take him down at some point. So he side sprawls out of it, but he gets wrapped up along the waist, trying to get to his feet, taken up against the cage a little bit. Edgar tries to lock a rear naked choke, but Bruce escapes, right? Now Bruce starts finding his jab. He's counter punching, and he's using his legs and oblique kicks to kind of keep Edgar honest. I got this round going to Bruce Lee, 10-9. He's now defended takedown. He got back on his feet, and he's the more aggressive offensively, right? Round 3, Edgar comes out right off the bat with a takedown attempt. Lee sprawls out of it. They get to their feet. Lee throws a front kick. Edgar goes down for a second takedown defense, and he catches him with that front kick right on the left cheek, bringing Edgar to his knees. Lee finishes the fight with ground strikes to a defenseless Edgar.
Nice.
Round 3
right.
TKO, 147 into the third round. Lee gets a huge win coming out of the gates.
I like it. Now, I approached it a little differently because I didn't have I had a tough time. I had all the stats for all these fighters we're working on, but I don't have stats for Bruce Lee. So I got to kind of go off of what I think he would be. And if I'm honest, I think what I know about Bruce Lee is he's incredibly fast. I know his kicks. You hear karate guys, kickboxers to this day talk about how Bruce Lee at his weight. You hear heavyweight kickboxers. So the hardest I was ever kicked was by Bruce Lee. So I have no doubt. Yeah, he has got kicks. He's got speed. I know he has strength, but I think a lot of his strength is based on his balance. Because you hear about him being able to take a barbell, both arms straight out. He would hold a 75-pound barbell and hold it there, which is that's an incredible strength.
That's insane.
That's insane strength. But I also don't believe that, because there's guys who are 260. I mean, 270. I mean, I don't know anyone in the world who can do that. That's it almost seems made up. It's that hard to do.
I don't know if I could do that with a 10-pound.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's the truth. I think a lot of it has to do with this core balance this guy had. And I think when you take him off his balance, I don't think he's as strong. I don't think there's any way a guy who weighs 132 pounds, or in this case 145 pounds, is able to just become Superman just because he drinks some protein shakes and works really hard. I think his core, his balance is what gave him so much power. That's how he had the 1-inch punch. It's all a balance thing. So I think a guy who's a D1 wrestler, a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, who's also a pressure fighter, I think it becomes hard for Bruce Lee to really keep his balance and to exploit those kicks, to exploit his strength and his speed. And I just don't see Bruce Lee getting into the ground game so late here, being able to hang with a guy like Frankie Edgar. So I'm going to go ahead and kick it the other way. I'm going to go submission in the second round here for Frankie Edgar.
All right. And keep in mind, my argument is solely based on Bruce Lee's at least been training for
No, of course,
a year or two.
And I assume that as well. I just see a D1 wrestler in college. I see a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I see a guy who's all about the takedowns. He's all about,
actually a good puncher too. He's a good boxer.
He's a good boxer.
It's not an easy fight. None
of these guys are. We did not hand Bruce Lee a whole bunch of chumps here. That's for sure.
It's true, and I could very well see it going that way too.
So who'll be doing
I'm gonna
next?
give Lee the edge, you know what I mean, on that, but I'm
Ah,
gonna go Max Holloway, the guy,
oof,
Max Holloway,
rangy.
interesting fighter. Yeah, very rangy, long. He's 5'11", 22 and 5, 10 KOs, so he's got a little bit more knockouts to him, 2 submissions, but he also has 10 decisions. So he's not knocking a ton of guys out, but he's got power when he needs it. But he's only got 1 submission loss. This guy goes deep. This guy fights, he fights the decisions.
When do you
He
have his
doesn't get he
when do you have
hasn't
his
been
record
knocked
as?
out. 22 and 5.
I think we have different information.
Oh, really? What do you have?
I got
Maybe I misread
I
the
got
amount
20,
of fights
I
he
got
was in.
21-6.
Oh, yeah, I saw 22 and 5, but it's close, give or take a fight.
Not to call you out, but I
But
don't miss a chance.
no, I got you. No, I mean, you might be right. I don't know. I saw 22 and 5, but anyway, this guy's got some notable wins. He's beaten Jose Aldo twice. He beat Frankie Edgar. He's beaten Anthony Pettis, Brian Ortega. But he's also had some noticeable losses to some shorter fighters, not super short, but Dustin Poirier, Conor McGregor are both 5'8", 5'9". Alexander Volkanovski, who's now the current 145 champ, beat him twice. He's 5'6", and he really counterpunched him and got in on his guard, got inside of him a lot and really outboxed him. So I got this going the distance, but I think it's a unanimous decision. And I think Bruce is going to use some grappling here. I think he's going to use what he learned, what he's learning in the MMA game. He's going to use some grappling. He's going to use some dirty boxing, inside outside leg kicks. His speed is the key, and close quarter kind of counter punching to beat the longer, but not necessarily stronger fighter. Holloway tends to throw a lot of looping punches with less
Mhm.
speed and power, and he holds his hands really low, and I think that's a problem. He's almost waits a little bit too much, and he's not a super aggressive fighter. And I think Lee can get in on him, counter punch with him, and get inside. So I think he's going to use some accurate combos while inside his range. I think he's kind of going to punish him on the inside. I think he's going to find a way to beat him, kind of like Alexander Volkanovski did. I think he's going to get inside the game, get in 2 or 3 shots, get out, get 2 or 3 shots, leg kicks, keep him at bay, keep that length. Really take away his length. And I think Bruce Lee wins in a decision.
I like it. I like it. So I looked at this a similar way with Holloway. His size is a problem. Like he is a long, rangy guy, and also I know you mentioned he wasn't incredibly active, but this guy's got a pretty high significant strikes landed per minute.
Oh
Um,
no, he definitely hits people, but a lot of times
he
I don't know. He
what he
doesn't.
seems like he does when I see him is he kind of sets it up with a jab. So it's not like he's just overly aggressive, but he's kind of luring you into throwing a punch so he can counter you
Yes,
and land a significant strike. So he's not like he's charging around the ring. He's jabbing at you and setting you up to hit you on the counter.
he
So
combos too. Very combo fighter, but
mhm.
also gets when he gets beat on the inside, he can't use that length. He can't loop around, so he doesn't
No.
generate a lot of power. And
He-
I think that's where Bruce might get him on the
and
inside.
he's got good footwork, good chin. And again, he's a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. This
Mhm.
guy's a real good fighter, and again, he creates a matchup issue with his size. But I do think the fact that he's not as ground oriented, he does not shoot for lots of takedowns rather. I think Bruce Lee would try and work the legs a lot. He would throw a lot of kicks in this case. He would try and use his speed to get in and get out. I can't see him being able to center his balance and really land some shots to put him away. But I think Bruce Lee is probably gonna outpoint him and win by decision here as well by just keeping his range with his legs in and out and just stay on their feet almost the whole fight here. I think
Yeah, I
that's
think
how
he's going
Bruce
to
Lee
hit and
wins.
stay outside his
And
range.
Max
Yep,
Holloway likes that kind of fight too. He likes to stay on his feet and kind of, like I said, set you up with a jab to eat a counter. And I think Bruce Lee is going to
absolutely.
count on his speed. He's going to count on his legs to help him keep his distance.
So now you have Bruce 1-1, and
Hmm.
I have him 2-0, right?
Yep.
So now go to now we're talking about the big time fights. Now this guy, um, he's actually lost in his last 9 fights. He's lost 6 out of his last 9 fights. So he's 3-6 in his last 9 fights. But in his prime, Jose Aldo, 28-7, 17 knockouts. So now we're looking at a guy who has a lot of power. He doesn't submit guys, but he does have Brazilian jiu-jitsu background. He's had 10 decisions. But he's also had 4 losses by KO
Hmm.
and 1 by a sub. So this guy's been susceptible on the chin. Nothing more notable than Conor McGregor's 13-second knockout of him with like just an angle jab to put
Yeah.
him to sleep
I mean,
face first.
you catch a punch when you're not
Um,
expecting it. It'll change your night.
and that's where I think this is going to help Bruce because even though you're like, man, he's facing another kind of fast, twitchy, powerful guy, I think he's also fighting a real aggressive guy, and I think that's going to play into Bruce's, kind of, his game, his repertoire here. So Jose Aldo, another former 145-pound champ, I think he is down to 135 as well now.
Yeah, he's the seventh ranked
He's
fighter there.
notable wins over Mike Brown, Uriah Faber, Kenny Florian, Frankie Edgar, and Chad Mendez. But he lost to Connor in a knockout. He's lost to Max Holloway twice, and he lost to Alexander Volkanovski, the current champ. I got this as a round one knockout,
Wow.
TKO. Lee gets him in 53 seconds.
Wow.
I think, starts out, both guys circling around the center of the octagon. A couple jabs are thrown, very twitchy. I'm going to say Jose rushes him with a 2-3 punch combo and gets caught with a backpedaling overhand right on the temple. Goes down to his knees, and he's like kind of dives into the cage when he's down on his knees. I think Lee gets behind him with some looping rights on the temple over his back. Ref stops the fight, protects Jose.
I like
Fight's
it.
over.
I like it,
Yeah,
man.
Lee just pounces on him with the right to the temple.
I wasn't expecting that. I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't expecting that. So
Yeah.
I'll jump right into what I got here. I don't have it going that way. I'll say that. I think that Jose Aldo, I think you sold his defensive skills a little short. This guy's he uses his Brazilian jiu-jitsu and his black belt in like a clutch wrestling style. It's like a defensive wrestling technique. He doesn't use it to submit you generally, but he uses it as like a defense. And his Muay Thai striking, I think, would be a counter to Lee's kicks as well. So I think you end up with a little more push and shove and more wrestling kind of style match in this right here. Because Jose Aldo is not really, even though he's got 17 wins by knockout, this guy does not land a lot of strikes per round. He's not a super active, busy fighter. He's really kind of a boring fighter. And I think in that way,
except when he takes on big time names.
Yeah,
he went after Connor and he got caught.
Yeah, well, he's had a lot of boring fights that he's able to win too. This guy, this guy can definitely
grinds people out. He grinds them out.
And for that reason, I think what he does here, I think he's not. I think there's no way that Lee gets settled. I think his Muay Thai striking is going to be kind of the counter to Lee's leg strikes as well. And I think ultimately his defense, his clutching, his grabbing is going to all slow all Lee down all the way. And I think you end up with another decision here this time for Jose Aldo.
So a 3-round decision for Jose.
I know.
So now you got Lee 1-2. I got him 3-0. Look at this. I'm building him up. I'm really loving Lee, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, this is where now we're talking. This is, Dana White creams his jeans.
Yeah, he's selling pay-per-views for this one.
It's going to make more money than him versus Floyd Mayweather Jr.
Yep.
Conor McGregor. They can't help it. Very similar style. Conor McGregor, a bigger man essentially, but McGregor 22-4, 19 knockouts. This guy clearly has power, and he has kind of one-touch power. Won't call it God power, but you saw what he did to Jose Aldo. 1 submission to his name, 2 decisions to his name. All of his losses, though, have come by submission. He's not been knocked out. He's the former 140.
He has been hurt and then just choked out while he's been hurt from a punch.
Oh, yeah. Nate Diaz hurt him. Khabib, I think, hurt him in round 3 of their fight.
Yeah.
I think he hurt Khabib a little bit, too. And then Khabib woke up and was like,
when you see a record with only 4 losses by submission, like, oh, this guy can't be hurt. It can only be submitted. Sometimes when you're knocked out, someone just goes over there and puts you in a choke and ends it.
Yeah. And that's kind of how I see this fight. I don't think it's going to be a knockout. Listen, Conor McGregor, former 2-weight champion, a 145-pound champion, 155-pound champion, went up to 170, fought Nate Diaz twice there, going 1-1. He did gas out in the first one because he wasn't used to the weight, fighting in that weight, but then he came back. This guy's walking around, like you say, he's 5'9", but he sometimes walks around at 183, so he's a bigger fighter for these divisions. Notable wins: Jose Aldo, Max Holloway, Chad Mendez, Eddie Alvarez he just beat. And Eddie Alvarez is one of the best pure boxer jiu-jitsu wrestlers I've seen in MMA. His boxing is second to none, and he just outboxed him. He outclassed him. Nate Diaz, another incredible boxer. He outclassed him in the second fight. It was close, but he fought with him. Dustin Poirier and Donald Cerrone, you saw him knock him out with a kick. But the notable losses: Nate Diaz did choke him out, and Khabib choked him out. You know what I mean? I got this going 3 rounds. I got rounds 1 and 2. Lee knows Connor's got power, larger fighter, walks around 185. So Lee's going to use that superior speed and footwork to counterstrike Connor's angle left jab, kind of cross combo. Lee's going to hit him with some tucking, looping lefts and like kind of like lower knee strikes. Very kind of quick Muay Thai strikes, like a Jose Aldo would. Lee gets bold, takes McGregor to the ground and smothers him up against the cage with an attempted north-south choke in the second round. Now he's learning. Lee's now adapting. He knows this guy's got jujitsu ability, but he's not subbing anyone. He's not great on his back. That's not McGregor's fight. Lee's going to take that and he's going to tire him out. He's going to wear him down because he really wants to take the sting off those punches. Round 3 comes. McGregor's looking a little gassed from trying to fight his way off the mat in the last minute 47 of the second round. Connor throws a lunging left. Bruce is going to get under his arm, sweep the leg to take top position on Connor, right? Now with Lee trying to control his hands and use ground elbows, Connor's going to try to hip thrust up to get Lee off top position, but finds himself giving up his back. Lee wraps his legs around Connor's waist, strikes his head to get Connor to release his gloves. The left glove in particular, Lee finds the window he needs, slips in a rear naked choke, and gives Connor his 5th submission loss of his career.
Wow.
Lee is 4-0. He's going up the ranks. He's making bank, bro. He's getting ass.
All right. Lee's getting ass.
But Connor touches him, I think it's over.
Connor's got serious power. He's got serious power.
Yeah.
And he's got an incredibly high striking accuracy percentage. He throws a lot of shots and he hits a lot of them. Connor's real good at that. He's pretty good with his takedowns too when he decides he wants to go get one. As much as you kind of like downplayed his ground game, he has a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But I would agree that's certainly his weak spot.
Not a slouch, but he's not going to the ground.
He's also a southpaw too, who's able to switch back and forth, which also can throw you off. And when we're dealing with a striker, that can really make a big difference and it really help. Probably it's a big part of why his striking accuracy is so high is he's able to switch back and forth and really confuse the defense. Not just that, but he's 5'9", so he's not super tall, but this guy's got a 74-inch reach. He's got really long arms. He's kind of like the perfect build for the kind of fighter he is. That being said, he's a notorious trash talker. I mean, he's going to be trying to get into Lee's head, even though I know he's come out publicly and talked very highly of Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee has a quote I think is made directly for Conor McGregor, and that is showing off is the fool's idea of glory. So I think in this fight, what you have here is a similar situation where, Lee is going to be avoiding that left-hand counter. It's going to be back and forth. They're going to be trying to keep distance. They're going to stay on their feet. Ultimately, I think it's going to come down to Lee countering McGregor with a kick to the head that's going to kind of knock him around, and Lee's going to be able to jump on there and get his submission. So I think we agree on this one here. I like Conor McGregor, but Conor McGregor has big holes that we've seen exploited before, and I think another striker, another guy who can throw kicks, might be the kind of guy who could do it, and a guy who we know is very fast.
And someone who's faster than him. And Conor really hasn't encountered too many fighters, if any fighters, really in his career, they've been able to beat him at the point of the punch. He's been faster than everybody. I mean, look how quick Jose Aldo seems to be. Quick twitch, quick, short muscle, striated muscle. Conor touched him quickly at an angle and put him to sleep. I think he's going to be like amazed. I just think Bruce's speed is going to can't wrap his head around it. Yeah, so now you got Bruce. Bruce is now with you 2-2.
2-2.
2-2. I got him 4-0. But this is where it comes down to the truth. He's going to get that title shot now, all right, with me, because he's 4-0. And now Khabib Nurmagomedov, is a 155-pound champion. But I think that he's relishing in this fight to test himself. Like he's tested himself against those bears in Dagestan. You know what I mean? This guy, he doesn't care about the weight. He's going to go to Bruce Lee's weight, even though he's a champion, because he's going to make a payday like no other. And he's going to face the grandfather of MMA, the Dana White said, considered the greatest martial artist of our time, right? He's going to go down to 145 and fight Bruce at that catch weight 145, right? But Khabib, 20-0. He's not a knockout artist, but he has 8 KOs to his name, 10 subs, 10 decisions. He is the current lightweight champion. He's got notable wins over Conor McGregor in the 4th, Rafael dos Anjos, Dustin Poirier, Ally Quinta, Edson Barbosa, you name it, right? I think this goes 3 rounds. I think it's a TKO stoppage due to a forehead cut and Lee
Mm.
not being able to continue. Khabib knows he's not going to fuck with Lee's speed and striking. He doesn't want to take a chance of getting clipped by a Lee strike. So he feints jabs and kicks to immediately take Lee off his feet in all 3 rounds. Khabib uses his size, strength. He uses that wrestling sambo grappling combo to stay active, to keep Lee on the mat. And I think he's going to keep him on the mat an average of 3 minutes and 97 seconds per round. He's going to pound and punish Lee on the ground. Lee's going to struggle to get to his feet. Khabib's going to stay active enough to keep the smothering ground position. Lee just does an admirable job, like an admirable job to just like avoiding the Kimura locks and rear naked chokes. So you admire Lee for avoiding that Kimura, that, you know what I mean, avoiding the rear naked. But I think a brutal elbow from Khabib over the top of Lee's right eyebrow is going to prove to be too deep and dangerous to allow the fight continue. Khabib has never been in trouble in his 28 fight career that I've seen. He's never even been close to a split decision. He's too smart to stand up with Lee. He's too strong on the ground to let up. I think Lee ends up 4-1, doesn't get the title, doesn't beat Khabib.
I have something a little similar to that, so I'll get right into it here. I think what you have here, the problem with Habib is that he's the bigger man, he's stronger, he's one of the best grapplers in the UFC, if not the best grappler in the UFC. Like this guy,
Maybe of all time, possibly.
exactly. This guy is a monster, black belt in judo, Russian wrestler, coming forward all the time, just ties you all up, ground and pounds you. This is what this guy does for breakfast. Lee is smaller. If he gets on top of him, I don't know how Lee could possibly get out of him. And you think of other guys who Lee has dealt with. I know we've had the story of Gene LeBell when they first met. Gene LeBell picked up Lee and carried him all around, and Lee was very mad about it. But here's a guy who's bigger than him, who is the godfather of grappling. I think you have a similar situation where you have a guy who's bigger, and Lee was, Lee took that moment and learned from it and trained with Gene LeBell. But I think when you get in the ring here, I think he has a problem with Habib, and I think Habib is able to lay on top of him and probably submit him in the second round. I think he's able to just wear him down, ground and pound him out. I don't see really much of a chance for Bruce Lee in this fight. This all being said, I mean, losing a fight is, you put yourself out there. It's not, as Bruce Lee would say, don't fear failure. Not failure, but low aim is the crime. In great attempts, it is glorious even to fail.
Remember, he also said, do not pray for an easy life. Pray for the strength to endure a difficult one. Yeah. So he's going to have a difficult life, a difficult time against Khabib. I agree with you. I gave Lee third round out of respect, but you're right. I mean, it's probably a second round end, a choke out, some kind of just brutalized.
So I think in conclusion of these 5 fights, we can agree that Lee would have been a fine addition to the UFC or any of these martial artists here. Obviously, as the godfather of it, the whole thing, that shouldn't be a surprise. But I think when we put him against these guys, some people would have been surprised. They would have thought time would have kind of changed and the sport would have passed him by. But I think a special guy like Bruce Lee could have transcended that and been competitive against anyone. So I know we have some final thoughts on this, but let's get to the plugs and shout outs first.
Absolutely. For those of you out there who'd like to support us, you can go to patreon.com/LanternLight Studios, support our show and support our other game development projects and other Lantern Light podcasts like Game Johns and Screen Johns. As always, thank you to all our current patrons and a special thank you to the Russell James Johns support group patrons. These guys are awesome. Thank you. If you'd like to support just our show, you could do that by going to glow.fm/GGMP. And thank you in advance for any support. Thanks to Luke Mullet for our awesome theme music. Thank you to Lantern Light Studios for allowing us to do this podcast and putting it on. Also like to thank Anthony Ziccola, our producer, for all the awesome show news and notes and helping us out. I'd like to thank our awesome, amazing audio engineer, Maria Lubanovic, for doing what she does. She makes us sound good, and we appreciate it. You can reach Alex and myself real simple, allmylinks.com/GGMP. You can find all of our social media, our website, any way to listen to the show on allmylinks.com/GGMP. Hit us up. Let us know what you think of the show. Let us know what you think we could do better. Any show moments, sports, anything like that you'd like us to touch on. Also, visit lanternlightstudios.com for more information about our show and our other amazing podcasts, Game Johns and Screen Johns. Those guys are kicking ass, man. We love it. If you like this podcast, you enjoyed our episode, please, we kindly ask you, give us that 5-star rating, leave us a good review. There are different mediums you could do that on, but Apple Podcast in particular does the 5-star rating and the reviews, so you could leave it there. And yeah, let us know how we're doing. So thank you guys for tuning in again.
Awesome. Thanks for the read there, Reno. Good job.
You got it.
I'm gonna
Thank
let
you.
you kick it off with some final thoughts. I just got a couple quotes here, or two of them in particular that I just want to read before we get out of here.
Yeah, he's a quote machine. I've got some too. It's so funny. I was gonna say, what are your favorite quotes? 'Cause I
All
wrote
right,
a
all right.
bunch
So,
of them
so, so,
down.
so we'll have a quote duel here. Let's hear what you
Okay.
got.
Go ahead. I got so I did the do not pray for an easy life. You
Mhm.
did the adapt what is useful, reject what is useless, right? But the key to immortality is first living a life worth remembering.
You got my one right there, and that's what Bruce Lee did.
Yep.
But I think we talked about the MMA stuff. I think it's worth mentioning what Conor McGregor actually had to say about him. He said, "I have no doubt he would have been a world champion in MMA, no doubt. He's fluid, he's loose, he's fast. His movement is fluid, it's efficient, it's functional. So many guys are addicted to strength and conditioning; they get just bulked up and stiff and slow. Bruce was free, his body was nimble. So there you have an example. And then there's plenty of these of UFC fighters talking about how they think he would have
I can't disagree with that. what you
done
said,
in
too.
the UFC today. So I think we were not out on a limb here because most of the UFC seems to agree with us. He was competitive and he would have. I mean, he would have been the champion, is what a lot of these people ended up saying.
Yeah, I agree. Imagine a young Bruce Lee reincarnated, starting off in like MMA. My God. And he even talked about it himself. Like he trained his body to be always aware, to be able to, if he needed to move left, he could move left at rapid speed. And it's a guy that you're like, wow, if he could die, if he could take less damage and use his speed to counter. But I got a good quote for you to end
Oh
it.
man, one
This
more.
is something outside of fighting a little bit. You know what I mean?
All right.
So this is the philosopher, Bruce, but this is for all the ladies out there.
Oh boy.
Love is like a friendship caught on fire. In the beginning, a flame, very pretty, often hot and fierce, but still only light and flickering. As love grows older, our hearts mature and our love becomes as coals, deep burning and unquenchable. So I'm going to tell that to my wife tonight.
Good luck. Good luck with that.
And then when she asked me who said that, I'm like, Reno Del Mar.
All right.
Gotta give Bruce the love.
Well, you have some good luck tonight with that. But for now, this has been Greatest Games Never Played, and we're signing off.
Peace out.